A while ago I made a video on a ROM hack called Pokemon Clover, which I thought was pretty incredible and could actually stand up to a lot of official Pokemon releases, even improving on the game in multiple aspects in my opinion. With that video receiving so much attention, a much more sinister video idea popped into my head. What is the worst Pokemon ROM hack, and how bad could it actually be? Well, after countless hours of scrolling through Reddit for a few minutes, I concluded that the Pokemon hacking community almost unanimously points to a single game as the overall worst. Pokemon Dark Rising. Even before the game starts, Dark Rising is already trying to show you it's different from your average Pokemon hack. Instead of Professor Oak asking you several way too personal questions, you're greeted by Arceus, who informs you that you're the chosen one and need to save the world. So they dodged one cliche and dove headfirst into an even more overused one. Anyways, you go through the whole rigmarole of choosing your name, gender, and talking to your mom. And then it comes time to choose your starter Pokemon, which in this game is Dratini, Gible, and Bagon. For my playthrough, I chose Bagon because I forgot it doesn't evolve into Tyranitar. After getting sent on a mission to pick up a package and winning your first trainer battle, you're finally ready to experience the first few moments of freedom in the game. And what do you get? 3 consecutive trainer battles. Now the reason I actually appreciate this opening is because it sets you up with what to expect in Pokemon Dark Rising. That being a lot of trainer battles. Matter of fact, I want you to picture in your head what you think would be an unreasonable amount of battles to have in a Pokemon game. Now double that. And then double that. And then throw 30 legendary Pokemon on top of that. And then throw yourself out a window because goddamn does it get tedious. Back to the game, you fight some more wild Pokemon, heal up at your house, and drop by with Professor Ivan one last time before setting off on your adventure. So, apparently there are quite a few game-breaking glitches in Dark Rising. If you walk into this particular wall, you just get completely frozen and can't continue. Now lucky for me, I only had to repeat about 10 minutes of the game, and I was able to look up what the actual best starter was, which was apparently not Bagon but Gible. So it wasn't completely a waste. Okay, I'm gonna kill myself. The early game of Dark Rising isn't too surprising or messy. There's a few fights to ease you in and give you some easy XP. There's also this level 50 boss, which luckily you're actually supposed to die to continue the story. Something you will definitely be thrown off by is the fact that your character actually talks in this game. A lot. Because if there's one thing Pokemon games needed, it's long monologues. Okay, I'm being too much of a sarcastic asshole, so it's time for me to say something nice about the game. The areas are really cool. Dark Rising was definitely trying to capture a sort of epic, massive scale adventure where you trek across a multitude of biomes and areas, and they were certainly successful in achieving that feeling. You're traveling across volcanoes and deserts and beaches or a glittering cave or some broken down factory. I understand these are mostly reused assets, as are most Pokemon ROM hacks, but the design is still very well done and makes the traveling more entertaining, when there's not miles of grass you have to wade through. After exiting this volcano, you run into this mysterious individual who tells you that he has kidnapped your father and plans to have him sacrificed, and then threatens to send you to the underworld. You defeat him incredibly easily, to which he informs you he was actually only using 10% of his power level. Of course. It's at this point in the game we hit our first rough patch, the Fire Gym. You can't get any water Pokemon up until this point to my knowledge, so you're stuck against these Pokemon with really great move pools that counter my Starly and Shroomish. I tried fighting this gym leader about a dozen times before I decided I needed to make some changes. Firstly, I needed a new Pokemon. Luckily, all I had to do was catch an Abra and I could trade it for Larvesta, which certainly couldn't be that hard. Damn it. Shit. Damn. Come on. Alright, this is the one. Nice. Next I can level Gible up to 22 where it can learn Dig, which is really important because it's the only super effective move I have against fire. And after about 2 hours of grinding and attempts, I was finally able to beat the gym leader. And I'm already on recording number 9 out of 62, god damn it. It was also around this point in the game where my brain began to turn to mush because of how many characters had been introduced. For some reason in Dark Rising you have multiple rivals, multiple villains, multiple maps. It definitely lacks the simplicity that makes Pokemon the lovable franchise that it is. I think they were trying to go for an almost movie-like story where there's all these intersecting plot points, but I'm just not confident a Pokemon hack is the right medium to tell this sort of story. It just kind of ends up being a lot of... It became very apparent to me in the next few hours of playing this game that the first gym fight was not just a fluke. This game is very, very hard. The next fight that really got me was against Brock. Yes, that Brock. At various points in this game, your opponent's level of Pokemon will just randomly shoot up, and it's kind of just up to you to grind until your Pokemon are strong enough to beat them. This is in contrast to the usual slow and natural progression that just kind of happens in Pokemon games. It's not too much of an issue in the early game, but later on you'll notice massive gaps between your Pokemon and your opponent's. After about 30 minutes of attempts on Brock, I beat him. After which, if you creep forward, you're greeted to a rival fight. Now, I shouldn't have to explain when you can't just double up difficult fights without warning like this, but I will anyways. I don't have health. If I just escaped a fight by the skin of my nuts, you can't just expect me to do it again without healing. The only time Pokemon games will really do this sort of thing is with the Elite Four, which you prepare for by bringing 99 Hyper Potions and Revives. Regardless, the rival fight was just too much for me to handle with or without preparation, so I just went ahead and beat the Water Gym leader, which was pretty easy. After over an hour of grinding, I was able to beat my rival and move on to this massive cave section, which ends in this legendary face-off battle. Once you win, you learn that the reason you were fighting Brock in the first place is because he was being mind-controlled by an evil Pokemon. This plot point sort of just gives the story an excuse to bring in characters from the Pokemon anime for you to fight, which I actually don't mind at all. In my opinion, when you bring in previously established characters, it makes it much less confusing than inventing your own, because you've already committed these characters to memory. Anyways, you go to a new city, beat your rival number 3, and then you run into this guy who's blocking your path. And when you interact with him, your character feels the need to narrate out loud that this fight is going to be difficult. Who is this guy? He comes off as an ordinary trainer, but I can sense somehow he's good. This fight took me 3 hours to beat. 3 hours to beat. 3 hours to beat. The main problem is that he has a level 51 Druddigon, which might not sound too ridiculous until I tell you that we haven't even reached the 3rd gym yet, and his Pokemon is level 51. For the record, my team up until this point was Staraptor, Breloom, Garchomp, Larvesta, Blastoise, and a Slave Pokemon. So I have solid type coverage along with solid physical special damage split. The problem with the fights is not only are the enemies highly leveled, but they all, and I mean all, use healing items. Plural. And about half of the Pokemon in difficult fights have an item called Leftovers, which also heals the Pokemon every turn, after an animation that takes far too long. That may sound like I'm nitpicking, but if you understood how long I spent looking at Pokemon going, you'd be experiencing an intense psychosis along with me. Next, you have to clear this whole boat full of enemies, where I proved Staraptor was the best bird-type Pokemon by beating an entire boss fight by spamming Brave Bird. And, credit where credit is due, the ship had multiple areas where you could heal, so you didn't have to backtrack too much like you normally do. I then beat the Psychic Gym without too much trouble since I had Bug and Dark-type coverage. After this, you then beat one of the many villains in this game, to which he turns into rock and his soul descends to hell. Actually, for real, this is not a made-up plot point. You then fight your 4th or maybe 5th rival, I'm losing track at this point, and then you fight another villain. You're probably noticing a pattern that every plot point is just a major boss fight, and to be honest, it wouldn't be too much of an exaggeration to say that the rest of this game is just a series of boss fights with how frequently they occur. This villain actually has a pretty convincing fake Amon, which I thought was pretty impressive except for the fact that they named it Conarp. Fucking Conarp? You save some kids, fight the children of the man you turn into stone and sent to eternal suffering, and then you walk through this giant cathedral encountering Pokemon every 2 steps. More legendary shenanigans occur, and then you arrive in this snowy town, where the gym leader is very easy to wipe out with my Volcarona. I then arrive in Pneumaticity City, where I get some much needed DMs. And then somehow I beat the fighting gym leader there despite being down several levels. After a few attempts I take down the normal gym as well, and then I have to get through this enormous lab as well as this ridiculously difficult rival fight. Hold on, not this ridiculously difficult rival fight, I mean the other one that takes place in the exact same building with a different rival. Travel through this desert, beat this fucking guy, beat the bug gym leader, and then after about 45 minutes of attempts and grinding, beat the steel gym leader. Next you take a trip across the ocean to beat one of your many rivals once and for all, to which this evil group of people behind him make him offer his soul or something. I'm actually not quite sure because the dialogue overlaps itself. I wonder what you have to say about that. I'm not even angry at this point. This game has turned me into a Tibetan monk. At certain points in this game, if you beat a boss and then backtrack to where they were, you'll just get the dialogue from before the fight happens, then you'll have to fight them all over again, even though they aren't even there. I say this so you don't make the mistake of thinking that just because I'm not talking about every glitch that happens, it means it's not happening, because there are a lot of glitches. Directly after the rival fight, which I had to do twice of course, you beat Misty, who was having the same possession issue as Brock. I found the fight pretty easy, and then I proceeded to ascend into space, which was pretty cool. Another boss fight and then another boss fight later, and look at that, we're in a completely new continent. There's actually not a huge amount to do here. You can explore underneath this casino and encounter those 2 trainers whose father you killed again, and you get to beat this rival for the last time, who has a slightly less convincing Fakemon. You then take a boat over to Millennium Town and make your way up this spirit tower and fight your rival for the trillionth time. After making your way to the top, you can fight this legendary Pokemon and catch him for this gym leader. Then you have to go back down and work your way through the gym and face him. You doing alright there, buddy? You look a little, never mind. Don't ask me why Sprite looks like Yugi spent a bit too much time in a microwave. Regardless, Season 2 are to beat, and we can finally move on to the last portion of this game. Draco Island. At the beginning of this area, there's this very well thought out room full of random unrelated fights for you to grind with. And once you go down this pathway, you get to fight this guy who's far too tall for a Pokemon character and just has 2 level 99 legendaries. Beat him and then continue down this path until you reach Pandora's Box, which while looking like a pretty cool area is just kind of an excuse to exposition dump a bunch of lore on you. After this, you enter a massive cave that is filled with boss fights. I think to the creator of this game, putting 15 boss fights in a row felt like they were ramping up the epicness or difficulty, but Jesus, at this point in this game it's just draining. And in the end, after all the struggle and all the hours spent, we end up here, the Elite Four. Or at least this game's take on the Elite Four. It took me one fight to realize I was going to need to grind a lot to have a chance of making it through. You see, when I usually play Pokemon games, to make it a bit harder on myself, I refuse to use any legendaries. And this game practically throws legendaries at you. I thought I would be fine without them. I was wrong. I was also very, very stubborn. So instead of just biting the bullet and replacing my team, which now included a Magnezone, I decided to level all my Pokemon up to the max. Logically. And yes, this did take forever, and no, I don't think I had any other choice. So here we go. This is the most difficult series of battles I have faced in a Pokemon game ever. The first trainer is named Lust. Yes, they're all named after sins. Lust has one major strong point, which is Cresselia. At this point in the game, I had nothing that was super effective against Psychic, so my best chance was to keep my Magnezone alive for long enough that I can use Flash Cannon, which lowers the opponent's defense sometimes, and therefore will do additional physical damage every time I'm lucky enough to lower their defense. However, if you leave Cresselia alive for too long, they will spam Calm Mind and just get enough special attack and defense to take out your whole team. Also, Lust has 2 full restores, which if you get unlucky, she could use both of them on Cresselia, and then you're fucked. Also, Cresselia has leftovers, of course, which just adds another thorn in my ass. My plan was to take out as many Pokemon as possible while keeping Magnezone alive and then just try to get lucky. Which after 40 minutes finally happened, meaning I was able to move on to the next trainer, Wrath. Wrath was pretty well rounded, but he didn't have any Pokemon that were particularly menacing. I got an early critical hit against his legendary Pokemon and the rest of the matchups were pretty easy, so it only took me a couple of minutes to take him out. Next on the chopping block is Gluttony, who is a bit more complicated. Her Snorlax goes down to my Breloom easily, but when she plays Zen mode I don't really have any Pokemon to easily take it out, so I often just needed to rely on Magnezone's Thunder, which obviously has a high miss rate. Her Gengar doesn't pose too much of a problem as my Blastoise has high DPS and can take it out without needing super effective moves. The problem Pokemon is Palkia, who one-shots every member on my team. The only way I was able to find out a way to beat him was to use my Garchomp to get a super effective hit off, die immediately, and then sacrifice a Pokemon to revive him, and then repeat this until either Palkia is killed or I run out of Pokemon. I was able to get a run where this worked after about an hour and a half, after which I beat her Dusknoir by spamming Double Team with my Magnezone until it was unkillable and then electrocuting it to death. The next trainer is Envy, and although it had a similarly powerful legendary Dialga, it only took me 2 tries to beat them as the rest of the team was pretty weak, and I was able to employ the same suicide bomber strategy with Garchomp. Well, it's about that time. If you thought this game had too many legendaries and was too difficult already, this final battle is going to blow your dick off. You face some evil version of your first rival who now has only legendaries. How cool! Instead of there being 1 problem Pokemon, there's now 6! Mewtwo, Regigigas, Dialga, Cresselia, Palkia, and Lugia. 5 of these Pokemon don't make me want to eat uranium. I can take care of most of these with my usual spamming and reviving strategies. In fact, I had already beaten 3 of them in previous fights, but Lugia is a different breed. And it's all because of Dark Chaos. Now you may be asking yourself, what the fuck is Dark Chaos? Dark Chaos is a made-up Pokemon move. It doesn't exist outside of Dark Rising, and it doesn't exist for a reason. Its stats are as follows. 200 power, 300 with the same type attack bonus, 100% accuracy, 100% chance of poisoning, and 25 PP. This is not a joke, this is not a prank, this is not satire, this is a real move, and yes, Lugia outsped my entire team. So literally the only option was to spam revives and stall for 25 moves straight, so that Lugia will run out of this one-shot move. And then you have to wait for it to run out of recovery, because it will spam the hell out of that move. And eventually, Lugia is just stuck struggling, because you exhausted every single move it had. And it's only a matter of time before this bastard Pokemon dies. And with that, Dark Rising is finally over. Which begs the question, why is this game so bad? First of all, the game was made over a decade ago in 2012, where standards were seemingly much lower considering how well it was received on forums back in the day, compared to the type of reaction it's getting now. Secondly, the creator, named Dark Rising Girl, was actually only 12 years old when the first Dark Rising was made, so obviously it's not going to have the same quality as other projects made by multiple grown adults. I think it says something that despite its overwhelming reputation, there will still be multiple online reviewers telling you it's one of the greatest Pokemon ROM hacks of all time. And while I'm happy Dark Rising can be recognized as being a very ambitious project with a massive scale, I think it kind of just shows that a lot of these reviewers are just talking out of their ass and maybe haven't even played the games they're talking about. Pokemon Dark Rising Hack will take you to a darker version of the Pokemon world with its intriguing storyline. It has complex gameplay, and some players may find it difficult compared to most of the other Pokemon games. You could say that. As for Dark Rising Girl, she would later release Dark Rising 2 and Dark Rising Order Destroyed, which from what I've seen are pretty big steps up in quality from the first game. She's been working on Dark Rising 3 for quite a while, and honestly I hope she doesn't quit making games. I definitely know the feeling of working hard on something only for you to look at it like it's a piece of dog shit a week later. It's pretty demotivating and just makes you feel like giving up. But I guess it's also the first step to making something that's not dog shit. Yada yada Einstein quote. Anyways, I better end this video before I make it too long and it gets delayed until 2025. Jesus Christ.